Well, good evening, everybody. Hi, it's Robert Hansen. Sunday night, 7:30 on Facebook Live. We meet. It's been a few weeks. I hope you've all had a very, very good closing to our our summer season. Right, Labor Day seems to suggest that to all of us, but the weather's been beautiful and it will be. So carry on, summer. We love it here. We're a big sand family, feet in the sand kind of people, you know. Anyway, hi, welcome. My name is Robert Hansen. We do these Facebook Lives periodically throughout the course of the summer. We started them last spring, and we're working our way through this coming up fall and winter season. We have some awesome topics that we will be featuring over the upcoming new season of fall and winter. If you'd like to follow me down the road, you can certainly come to me at robertehansen.com. robertehansen.com, that's the website. I'm on Facebook, which is a part of tonight's feature, of course. I post daily pretty much a lot of different information, comments, insight, shared experiences that I've enjoyed over the years and so on, and I hope it helps you guys out and guide you. If you have any particular things, topics you'd like to talk about, anything you'd like to talk about, message me, let me know, and I will do my best to address it if I feel qualified to respond to it. If not, I'll guide you someplace. Alrighty? And finally, when we go into tonight, if you're new, let me know. If you're coming back, let me know that too. Just a thumbs up, how you doing again, just something. So we have some sense of our audience here tonight, and we're going to get rolling. Tonight's topic, of course, is universally discussed. It's in every psychic bookshop. It's in every psychic store. It's in every spiritual shop. It's in every religious section. Whether you're coming from a religious point of view, a spiritual point of view, an atheistic point of view, it does not matter. Tonight is wide open. Tonight's topic is 3 sections, basically, on the process of dying, death itself, and the movement towards what we commonly refer to as the eternal. For some people, the eternal is subdivided into different sections. Coming out of the Christian culture, for example, it's heaven, hell, purgatory, or something like this. In other cultures, in Buddhism and so on, they have 6 or 7 different levels of evolution. And the Hindi faiths, for example, they have different reincarnations, which are perpetuation. So it really varies on the approach, the upbringing, the outcome, how you were raised, conditioned to think about certain things. Okay, so we're going to first look at upfront, close. This whole thing called preparing to die. Preparing to die. And preparing to die has a lot more to it, much deeper than just saying, well, place me in a facility, put me in a rehab, I know I have a particular illness, I'm dealing with terminal illness, I have long-range terminal illness, I know someday I'm going to die, that kind of a thing. My behavior is such that I hang out with crazy people and death will be coming. I'm in an imminent situation of harm. I'm probably going to die as a young guy. You know, I've always mentioned our great military guys, our great Marines and Navy guys, and all these wonderful people that serve our great American nation. And every one of them at some point in their head, especially if they're going to, you know, if they're going to a fire zone, if they're going to a free fall area where there is aggressive combat duty being done, if they're going downrange, especially those guys, and most of them are men, but there may be the rare woman that goes there that go downrange, and they are really in the mouth of the dragon, and they do incredible work on behalf of our great country. All of them at some point in their heads know, quote unquote, know that death may be coming. That death may be coming. And I had an interesting conversation about this not too long ago with a friend of mine who comes out of the military world. He did serve some time in Afghanistan. He was in various encounters overseas. And, you know, they talk about the fearlessness of these men and these women that serve us. And they really, in a high percentage of cases, you know, have no fear of death. I mean, they just don't possess that. They have true warrior status internally. However, if those are those guys that are parents, the mothers, the fathers connected to them, all of those people, if you say to one of the U.S. Marine fellows or a Navy SEAL team guy or a U.S. Air Force pilot, do you worry about your child dying of leukemia, or do you worry about your mother getting hit by a car if she lives in a rough neighborhood and you're worrying about her safety? Every single one of them will universally say, yes, I don't fear my death, But I absolutely fear death, because death will come to my family 100% guaranteed at some point in time. You know, and we're all going to deal with it. And whether you try to avoid it or make believe it's not coming, it's coming. But the problem is the way people present it to most folks is death is coming. They have the dark reaper, they have the hooded cloak, they have the spooky hands, they have the, you know, the flashing red eyeballs, all of this stuff. And this was culturally introduced for millennia. Not just in the Western culture here. It was prevalent in Europe, it was prevalent in Africa, it was prevalent in the Orient, because for most people, the image of the unknown, the ending of what we know, is frightening to everybody. I mean, it seems to be frightening to all. One of my favorite writers, I enjoy reading about him quite a bit, is a guy by the name of Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti. He's an enormously gifted philosopher and speaker, and he passed away so many years ago, but I do follow his work a bit. And he says very clearly, it's not the unknown that we fear. It's not the unknown that we fear. It is what we fear is losing what we know. We fear losing what we know. That is the essence of preparation for dying. If I were to ask you guys right now, whoever's watching and listening in at this particular moment, if I were to snap my fingers like this, and in a minute I'll do that actually, like that, and when I do that, I want you to imagine, if you could, just use your imagination, and make believe you have no memory at all. You have none. No memory. You can't remember anything other than what's just in this moment, and as soon as you have this moment, that also goes away. I'm going to ask you to do it with me now. As soon as I snap my fingers, I want you to just make believe that you have no memory at all. None. And we're back. Without any memory of the past, without any memory of your past family members, if you have no memory of the past of your particular life, the story of your life that has unfolded throughout your past, if that is all has been erased from you, there would be really no suffering. There would be none. There would be nothing to trigger the emotion of grief, anxiety, desperation, reaching out, crying, weeping. None of it. None of it. I'm not suggesting you should lose your memory. We needed to drive home with a car, and we needed to pay our bills, and we needed to get a loaf of bread in the morning. We need to remember. We need to know our names and so on. Obviously, memory is vital to the human experience. I'm not even implying that we should not have memory. What I'm raising as the question is the reason why we retain memory, other than memory that is necessary, I mean truly necessary to function, is the human mind, commonly called the egoic structure of the mind, identifies, forms its identity. In other words, the way it sees itself, the way it processes itself, the way it processes the world around it, has been the result of about 1 million years of evolution. It has been the result of conditional upbringing, society's upbringing, religious upbringing, spiritual upbringing, and on and on and on and on for century after century after century after century worldwide, from top to bottom, left to right, around the globe. Every human being, every human animal that has come into this world has had some stumble upon death, has seen death up close, has seen the interruption of what we call the physical form, whether it be of a friend, a loved one, a family member, an animal, a pet, and so on. That is the big primary thing most people talk about when we talk about death, right? But death does waffle into other areas. For example, the death of an idea, the death of self-esteem, the death of a loving relationship, the death of the family unit. All of these are also forms of dying and forms of death. They are. And all of the suffering that comes with those movements of dying things, dying ideas, dying objects. You know, you have your mother's living room set in your house, and over the years it starts to crumble apart and it dies and it hurts you. You have a car that you've had for 10 years, it's falling to pieces, but it got you through college, and it's your Volkswagen, and you never wanted to give it up, and you have to finally junk it or sell it or give it away to charity, and you're weeping in the driveway. It's like losing an old friend. It's a form of grief. It's a dying. It really, really is. So the question really to look at this carefully, other than, and I want to be very clear about this, other than the physical form dissolving, other than the body coming to its close, which is 100% to everything that has been given a life form. Anything that has been given a life form, some form of energy of life, eventually will come to its dissolution. It just is the nature of the universe. Nothing stays indefinitely except emptiness. That's it. The universe is timeless, so we don't even attach time to it, which is why we call it the eternal, which we're going to get into a little later. And you also have the infinite, which means it's endless and boundless, and everything that resides within that is temporary. Even star systems that have been around for quadrillion, trillion years, eventually, those star systems will burn out and others will perhaps be reignited. It's just the movement of things in a very dramatic way, of course. But bringing it down to our home front here, when we're dealing with elderly parents or adult parents, we kind of expect them to at some point leave. We do all we can to preserve life, hopefully with dignity, a sense of grace, a sense of compassion, a sense of love, and we internally begin to prepare for that experience. Life itself provides us. Other family members have died off, friends' mothers have died off, friends' fathers have died off. You've gone to a funeral for a friend's brother, and with respect, in some cases, you may have gone to a funeral where someone has buried a child. And the confrontation of death, the looking at death, the reacting and being around people that are experiencing death on their doorstep, the weeping in the hallway of someone who's being given last rites in, let's say, the Catholic tradition, or the Rebbe is coming over and anointing the soul before death should arrive, and they're doing the prayers for the dead, the great, beautiful Kaddish prayers of the dead and dying. All of these things are taught rituals, taught preparation to kind of get us ready to die, or getting our loved ones ready to die. But at the same time, it is preparing us as well to come to terms with dying. And as I went back a few minutes ago and I was talking about the military guys I was talking with, again, they'll make it straight to your face, and you meet all of them. They're not lying either. They're 100%. They are absolutely not BSing you. They are 100% not frightened of their own passing. They have a courage that some people can't even calculate, right? And that's not just true with military guys. It shows up in regular civilians, regular citizens every day of the week. A la the hurricanes down here in Irma and the one over in Houston, that have desecrated the South. I mean, it's pulled apart Corpus Christi and every other part, Galveston. It's ripped apart the South. It's ripped apart southern Florida. So we all understand that regular people have great capacity for courage and to deal with tragedy on a much bigger level than you can imagine. I assure you, there are first responders down in those states, in the great state of Texas or in Georgia or in Florida, wherever the storm has touched. And first responders, first guys, rookies, young men, young women, throwing on their wading boots, going out on jet skis, going out and on ambulance rescue teams, and seeing a dead body floating by, or finding someone, 2 or 3 children, all in one room who have died. You have those kind of experiences. You get a very rapid lesson at the physical phenomena of rapid death. You get working in ER, police officer, fireman, and so on and so on and so on. So sometimes death can come as a jolt, and other times it can come in seeping into the system. But in our private moments, while we're not distracted by the activity around death, which is why many people can function, the adrenaline kicks in, the endorphins kick in, it's not your family member per se, you're helping another, there's a sense of compassion and rescue, all of those things are involved. And that can happen in a Hurricane Sandy situation, or it can happen in the bedroom upstairs with your mom who is dying and goes from being sick to terribly sick in minutes. We all have, and we are all called to those emergency situations in life. So part of the preparation of getting ready for that has been given to you since childhood, whether you realize it or not. The problem is that most people have been taught to resist this natural process. Look, there are many, many cultures, and I've traveled a bit. I'm not a world-class traveler, but I've traveled enough, and I've spoken to thousands and thousands of people in my career about death. That's all I talk about is death and dying. In many cultures, the process of death is not a big deal. And I'm not minimizing this, please. I'm not in any way suggesting death isn't a big deal, because to my family, it's a big deal. To your family, it's probably a big deal. But in other cultures, it's not that big a deal. People are dying on a daily basis. Kids in India starving in the streets. Children in Africa being killed. People up in Kosovo during the terrible wars in Eastern Europe. You have these people in Western Europe right now being attacked and threatened by ISIS on a continuing basis. They're always looking over their shoulders suddenly, as we are here in the United States, right? So we're very, very aware. We've been made heightenedly aware through media, social media, and all of these things, that the human form is fragile, it is expendable, and it will go. The form in which death takes place, it really doesn't matter. We can get into semantics of good guy, bad guy, and he died a happy death and he died a bad death. We can get into all of that. But the key to it is that when death is arriving, when the form is dissolving either by itself or there's been an interruption of the form by another form of energy. By another form of energy. That other form of energy may show up as a human being with a rifle, but it's still another form of universal energy moving through that individual with the rifle. It is another form of universal energy coming through the bone cancer. It is another form of universal energy moving through the system causing ALS. So one of the preparations in the death process to truly prepare for the dying is to really honestly look internally and recognize that you too are part of this moving fluid process in which a conclusion of physical form will eventually arrive, and then there will be a continuation of what we call your consciousness. Your consciousness. Your consciousness contains your memory, your experiences. It contains what you're seeing. It contains everything. That it flows. It happens to be flowing through the human form temporarily, which we then call me. Me. I now give the consciousness within me an identity, a name, Robert, an age, an appearance, white guy, white hair, blue eyes, right? In my mid-60s, and so on and so on and so on. I form an identity. And when it is suggested to my identity, when it is suggested to the me, inside of me, that the me at some point will not exist, that my thinking machine will stop, my memory will be cut off, which comes out of mind, right? And my physical body will end, my heart will stop, my lungs will implode, and either I will be cremated or I will be placed in a casket or whatever it might be. Death will be followed by some kind of ritual to remove the body. When I really see this, I'm not talking as an intellectual idea or some kind of thing you talk over coffee with your friends. When you really, really get it, like when you really, really love somebody with that same absolute knowing, and you have that same absolute knowing that you are temporary, a beautiful thing starts to happen in your preparation. One, you begin to realize things are temporary. That everything you're holding on to, bank accounts, money, this and that, which are very important in the temporary state of human life. I'm not minimizing having a roof over your head and shelter from the storm and preparing for later years. Don't misunderstand me at all. That's all vital. And if you don't do it, you're a little silly, right? I mean, more than silly. You have to kind of take care of yourself going forward, right? Because at the end of the day, it's your job to take care of you, right? Take care of you the best you can. But in this preparation, we are beginning to see internally that we are temporary. When I start to recognize that I'm temporary, a fear rises, doesn't it? Someone says, listen, you're going to die down the road. As an idea down the road, you say, yeah, someday I'm going to die. It becomes a very distant thing. When you're 15, 16, 17, and you got, all kinds of muscles, and you're in great shape, and you feel good, and someone says, you're going to die one day. You go, yeah, I know I'm going to die. Not now. I'm going to die 50, 60, 70 years from now. What the hell do I care? Live life for today. I want to have a good time. That's the average comment. And no one's telling you should not have a good time. As long as you don't, hurt somebody, do something really silly to yourself, go enjoy your life, expand it. That's why life has been given to you, experientially, to go out there and celebrate all of the opportunities that what we call this heaven and earth has been providing to you. But sadly, a lot of us are distracted by all of this, and we get caught in the head. And then we start to worry, what will happen if I don't think anymore? What's going to happen when this form comes to its close, right? So as I said a few moments back, one of the ways that the universe really prepares you is to allow you to witness other death. It could be the death of a bird in the street. It could be the death of a dog, a cat, a loved one, a friend. It starts to prepare you. We've all learned to die to our past, or most people, we learn to die to our past. What used to trouble me at 12 years old about getting a certain toy, and I thought if I didn't get this toy, my world was coming to a close, or if you were 17 and your first girlfriend doesn't want anything to do with you, and you feel like you're ready to jump out of a window or something, God forbid, by the way, you feel like everything is over. And then 2 weeks later, you're going out with somebody else and it's forgotten. But at the time, it feels permanent, it feels complete, it feels painful, it hurts like crazy. And we have to go through this little micro mini death, this little baby death, right? And then you get told that you no longer can do a certain sport. It's another little mini death. Or you can't get the job you want, another little mini death. And all of these little micro deaths, these little mini deaths that are provided by the stream of consciousness for all of us, are lessons being taught. But people don't do that. What they do is they say, I don't want this. I want what this is telling me, not what's really happening. And they set up a resistance. Classic point, you go to any funeral parlor, even including my own family, in most cases, we go with the casket. My wife and I have been talking recently about doing a cremation process instead. It's more efficient, a little easier, so on and so on and so on. But the point I'm making is, in a memorial setting, in a wake, we typically call it in the Christian tradition, which is maybe a day, 2 days at the most. Years ago, it was 3 days. It went on forever, it seemed. But let's say it's a one-day overnight kind of a deal. The person is placed, unless there's something extenuating, they may have what we call a viewing. And you look in the casket, right? And the person is sitting there with their hands on their chest. Maybe there's some religious stuff or whatever. And people often will walk by and say they look great, or the hair is not quite right, or that's a beautiful dress. Doesn't she look beautiful? I think all of you are well aware that when we do that, that is a form of denying death. We're even dressing up death at its doorstep to make believe death isn't real. Right? We do that. I mean, I'm sure you've all seen this. I'm sure you've all seen it. And we also honor those who have died. The taps playing at military and so on, and flags and caskets being touched, and the rituals of the religious people honoring people, and there are memorial fundraisers and marathons that are run, and T-shirts with the faces of children, and all of the beautiful, beautiful honorings that go on to, quote, keep the memory alive. Right? So here is this conflict, right? You have a mother and father who have buried a child, and they want to keep the memory alive, right? And I understand it. It's beautiful. It's awesome to watch. I've participated with them in various fundraisers throughout my career. Tons of them, actually. On the other side, you also have this thing about memory. And you ask that parent, or you ask that husband, or that mom and dad, or whatever, if you were to forget or have no memory of what has happened, do you understand that your suffering would be over? And of course, they go back and say, are you kidding me? I'll never forget my son. I'll never forget my daughter, because they believe by forgetting is the same thing as being with them. They think forgetting is getting rid of them, where forgetting has nothing to do with that. Forgetting has everything to do with the idea, the consciousness inside. You're forgetting about, removing, letting go of the resistance that they have physically died. You accept that completely, and you accept their soul in all of that beauty and all of that glory, including the natural human reflex for sorrow and grief. And you're going to hurt. It hurts like crazy. So even in preparing for your own death, or preparing for another one who you love who is dying in front of you, boom, they're dying, you're getting prepared, around the hospital bed, as it were, or in the medical unit, or at the hospice. You're getting ready. How does one prepare? When you sit close to the dying, and I just did this twice in the last month. I shared both of them on my Facebook page a while back about two very good friends of mine that recently crossed over. And one in particular, my friend Artie, was with me for 30 years as a friend and a colleague in my AA, and very, very dear to me. I was the only one there when he died. I held his hand basically as he took his last breath. I was there right with him to the very, very last moment of his physical form. But when I sat there, oh yeah, I had some tears. I did. But I could see, and I don't mean just with my eyes, I could see this magnificent shift from the sick, cancer-ridden guy who was a good friend of mine. He used to be a big, solid man, into this human stick figure who could barely breathe, take a breath of air. And I was watching this form just break apart like a beautiful flower opening. And I could see the soul, when I say see, feel, and I could see this beautiful light rising and coming to the stillness, the shedding of the form, and this beautiful shift back into the stream of consciousness, back into the flow, like this, you see. Now, my friend Artie, myself, and most people like this, when that physical form comes internally, where the outsiders get confused, no disrespect to you guys, but most do, they feel, or they have been taught to believe, or some guys got them convinced in their head, that when you die, you suddenly get magical wings, and you're like a butterfly, and you're playing golf all day, drinking a whiskey or something, and you're off having a grand old time. And people will say, yeah, I know my husband's still riding his chopper in the sky, or my daughter's playing tennis in the sky. You know, it's all romanticized grief statements, which are very normal. They help people feel better. It takes them off the hot seat of suffering. It kind of creates a movement of imagination that makes them feel more happy than sad. And there's nothing wrong with it in itself, as long as you don't stay too attached to that stuff for too long. Then it could become a problem for you guys, you know. But what you really, really want to look at here is that what really has occurred after the physical form is that the consciousness, which we would call, if you like this lingo, the soul, or the Atman, or the inner presence, for our purpose, so let's call it consciousness, for tonight, soul. All of that retains the memory and the experiences of the past. You do not shed those things. You do not shed those things. They continue to flourish in this stream of consciousness. The only thing that has stopped is the physical form, you see. So when the body is beginning to go from dying into the state of death, we have to now look once again. So I use my friend Artie. I'll get more personal. I'll use it with my my brother Brian, who was gravely ill on St. Patrick's Day several years ago, and we were at 4 o'clock in the morning here at a local hospital, and we knew he was in desperate trouble. It came out of nowhere. He was sick in 24 hours or less, and probably within 12 hours of really being admitted, death came to visit my brother and never let him go. He died of a very serious infection of his lungs, which still remains unexplained to this day. However, the point I'm making is myself, his wife, some of his daughters, my brother, and so on, we were all in the outer hallway preparing to hear the bad news. Preparing to hear the bad news. Right? So on one level, we were waiting for the bad. We were told it's bad. It's going to get bad. It's going to be bad. Death is coming. It's going to be bad. And yet I knew. Of course, I would physically miss my brother, of course, to hug him, to kiss him, to watch hockey, to watch football, to fight and yell with each other, to laugh and hug each other. All of that I'm missing. Of course I miss it, right? You miss it because your memory says you must miss it in order to be a good brother. If you're not a good brother, then you won't miss it. But if you're a good brother, you will continue to suffer for a long time. You will, because you're doing a good job at suffering, and you're going to prove to everybody what you loved. And by being a good brother also, you're going to continue to think about him, think about him, think about him, think about him, and you become a bad brother when you don't think about him, think about him, think about him, and always create memorials and all of that. Just think about it for a minute, please. Think about it. So I'm in the hallway Like with my friend Artie holding his hand, I couldn't get to my brother. I couldn't get to him. He was in a locked unit. He could not get out. It was a medical condition which was very serious. They had hazmat suits on almost. That was really, they didn't know what was taking my brother's beautiful life. And my younger brother, was my brother Brian. And I came home. I lay down in bed. It was about 4 in the morning. And he had not died yet. He had not just died yet. My wife was waiting for me, and I said, my brother's probably going to cross. I pray to God he doesn't. I was praying in my own way of Catholic prayer. I was doing what you guys would do. I said, please find some miracle of life. He's only a young fella. I said, please, he's got children. He's got a daughter getting married in 7 weeks. He's got a grandbaby. He says, please. He's a good guy. He's a great guy. And the answer to my prayers was, he needs our help more than yours. He needs us more than you. His illness is too strong. We have to release him. Let us receive him back with us. The us being the consciousness of our family who loved him and flowed with him and knew him in this world prior to his death physically. They drew to him. In addition to that, by the way, other vibrating consciousness that identify with the soul, the essence of the soul, they also come. Some people like to call them spirit guides and angels. That actually does occur. It actually occurs. They come and they receive the dying. Even the bad guys. I know some of you don't want to hear this, but even the bad guys, because the bad guys were driven by mind and emotion, and in most cases, they were the result of terrible abuse, terrible cruelty, conditioning, ideas driven into their head, all of the insanity of the world driven into certain people's heads, and they responded to it negatively, and as a result, many people feel they should never have forgiveness. They perhaps have the highest level of acute deficiency of thought, maybe ever, these kind of guys. And the universe also learns to release them. They do. Whether you like it or not, that's what happens eventually. They're going to be released. No one is held hostage for an eternity. That's a pulpit thing, a fire and brimstone thing to make people feel better or to scare the bejesus out of you so you don't make a single mistake the rest of your life in the fear of being boiled in oil or something. I mean, it's just craziness. So when death arrives, what is it really that physically dies? The body? Yes. But what else? What else? Consciousness remains, which includes all memory, vibrations, the essence, the soul continues. This is why the idea that death is permanent, death is terrible, death is something to be feared, something to avoid, something to detest, is driven by the thoughts of you guys and people like that tried to do it to me and other people that I know have been taught to believe this. And yet there are many cultures that, number one, they don't fear the death process. They just don't. They witness it a lot. They have a lot of conditioning to it. They've seen it all the time. So for them, the forms dying is not, it's like leaves falling off a tree. It's not a lack of humanity. It's not a lack of compassion. It's just they've been saturated with it for centuries, culturally. It's just something that's expected. When you work in certain places where the average lifespan is 45 years old because they're working at salt mines and coal mines and no medical treatment, and it's not like here in the great US of A where somebody, and death comes at 35, 40 years old, that is an average age, and they don't expect the life. They don't expect it. They don't expect it. So for them, it's not a big thing. We make it a huge thing. I mean, we make it huge. That death is something that is really a horrible thing, and the only way to offset it is to honor it constantly, you see. And that's really what kind of causes the conflict in a lot of people. I'm going to honor, I can't honor. I'm tired of honoring, I have to, like this, and it goes back and forth. So when the physical phenomena of death arise for someone in your family, or when your imminent death is coming, what is it that's really going to die other than the fact your physical form will come to its dissolution? Everything else stays in place. You don't go jet streaming off to behind the moon. You don't go flooding yourself to the Antarctic. You wake up fundamentally exactly in the stream of consciousness you left behind. It would be like taking your foot out of a shoe and you leave the shoe behind and your foot comes down right next to it. You're still in movement, you're just not wearing the shoe anymore. That's exactly what it's like. And when death does arrive, it is also called the final portal, which means if you are privileged enough to know that you're dying, you have been told that death is imminent, right? Oh, how can that be a privilege? You could have a serious illness and not know you're dying and get blindsided by it, or you could have an opportunity, because your body will also tell you this, that you know the physical form is about to change. This is your big moment, because it is there you're going to say, I don't want to die, I'm scared to die, I refuse to die, I don't want to be the butterfly, I want to remain the caterpillar, keep me chained, keep me locked, I don't care how you do it, I just don't want to leave the people I love, and I don't want to leave what I know, I don't want to leave my house, I don't want to leave my job, I don't want to walk away from my grandkids, I can't do it, it's unbearable for me. Right? That's what people do. That is, of course, complete fear talking and complete non-acceptance talking. And for that particular person, at that level of their consciousness, when they cross over, which they will, because one moment they're going to go quiet and they're just going to die, and they'll say, whoop, well, that wasn't so bad. But however, all of that anxiety, all of that vibrational fear, all of that now has to be dealt with and shed over the time in the next evolution of consciousness, like this. It does. In the Christian tradition, we would call that a purgatory state. In other religions, they have other terms. It's kind of a way station where you have to kind of get rid of it, get this crap off your chest, as it were, right? For the rare few people, when that death moment is starting to come in and you know it's about to happen and you know death is on its way, you have an amazing opportunity. You do. There are people I know that go to Japan, that have lived in India, that welcome the opportunity to get to this place where they completely surrender. They have no future they can project. There is no future that they can hang on to. There is nothing. They know that in the next couple of days, it's over. And they attend to themselves quietly. They sit quietly, and they feel the fear rising. They can feel the fear leaving. They can feel their body beginning to quiet down. And what's really beautiful, because I've seen it with my own two eyes, it's almost like a luminescence, a glow, starts to break apart out of their chest. My friend Artie had this. The top of his head began to glow. I could see it. As a medium, I could see it. And I said, man, you're good. You're good. And for half an hour, by the way, I held that man's hand after he died. And I meditated with him and I prayed with him. I didn't pray for him to have to return back into the world. I didn't pray for him not to have suffering. I just prayed for him to be awake, to be conscious, to be centered, to know that he is loved and was loved. That's all I did. And I trusted everything else to the process that I know that I deal with on a daily basis. And I'm telling you as a dear, dear friend to all of you, there is nothing to worry about. My words mean nothing. Otherwise, it's just, oh, that's a nice thing he's saying. Robert's saying a nice thing. Oh, it makes me feel better. It doesn't matter. What matters is does it matter to you? Are you sensing it, what I'm describing? So for these first two parts, you have leading up to dying, preparation for death. The preparation for death has been taught to you the minute you were born. You have it within you. It is your mental resistance to that which is natural that causes all of this garbage. Animals get sick in the wild, they lay down on their side, they die. Elephants walk to the proverbial elephant graveyard, they die. Birds fall off of a tree branch and they end. Leaves come off of trees and they end. Fish eat other fish and they end. Car crashes come and forms end. House fires come and forms dissolve. Cancer comes and forms empty. However, like all other animals, like all other beings, especially mothers to children, there is an enormous grief in the separation on the physical human animal form. And I don't want that to go away from you by some hocus pocus spirituality or something. You have to grieve. It is normal. It is healthy. It is natural. It is expected. As long as you don't abuse yourself or abuse others, chemically, biochemically, mentally, harming your physical body, carrying on ad nauseum for years and years and years and years and years about what you have lost, trying to make yourself a perpetual victim of the universe, That's an egoistic portrayal, by the way, to constantly seek comfort and compassion and care, years and years and years on, wanting to be proverbially hugged continually. All of that. We never want to use the soul of a person that has died, a loved one that has died, as a vehicle for making ourselves wanted more. And you know a lot of people do that. You know it. And I've seen it many, many, many times. I'm not blaming them. That's just the way they're built. But if you kind of call them out on a little bit in a gentle way, they'll say, you're right, I'm kind of overdoing this. Well, why? What are you getting out of it? What are you getting from it? Manipulating others to self-aggrandize yourself. You know, just give it some thought, please, okay? So preparing to die is simple. It really is very simple. And the easiest way to do that, and I'm not trying to be too much in Buddhist philosophy tonight, is that you have to stay in the present moment. When you release the last moment, when you don't drag it into your memory, or the week before, or the month before, right? You don't keep dragging all this stuff into the present moment. You're allowing the past to die. And when you allow the past to die, you free up internally in your consciousness. This space begins to open. Because now you're not all cluttered with the past. And this beautiful window begins to open. And you can begin to process this moment completely. And for those of you that have come to see me, for those of you that have come to my classes, ever seen me in the public arena, I have told you many, many times, your loved ones can only exist in this present moment. They do not exist in the movement of your memory of the past. With deepest respect, they do not exist in the old baseball Little League photograph of your son. That's personal for the family. It's reflective. It helps. It heals. It hurts. I'm not suggesting that you do anything about it. I'm not telling you to get rid of anything. Don't do it. What I'm asking you to do is see it for what it is. It's a time to cry, a time to weep, a time to remember. And then when you put it down, you allow it to lie still. And you return back to the present moment and rejoin the beautiful soul of your son, your daughter, your husband, your mother, your father, which is vibrantly present right here. That is the key of learning how to die before you die. It is to stay present and let the past die. Stay present, let the past die. Stay present, let the past die. It does not mean you forget the past. You just allow it to be as it is. That's all. You allow it to be as it is. You don't resist it. You don't fight it. You don't touch it. You leave it as it is. You follow me? And by the way, if you're just coming back or you're here for the first time, I haven't asked this in a while, please let me know. If you're coming in for the first time or just returning back, we have some beautiful other workshops coming up. We'll be posting them on the website in the very near future. I hope you guys are enjoying this. But I also want to talk about the third stage. So we have preparing to die, the death process, and eternal. Before I touch on the eternal, I want to jump you back to death and dying and death for a moment. In most spiritual teachings, whether it be from the Christ, the Buddha, Gautama Buddha, Siddhartha, which was his original name, whether it come out of Muhammad, it doesn't matter where the teachings lie in some of these great spiritual teachers. It doesn't matter where. They all, whether it be the Quran, whether it be the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Torah, the Holy Bible, whichever version you care to look at, they all try to prepare the human soul for dying, and meaning that there will be at some point a experience in which the physical phenomena, quote, the being, the person, is going to meet, quote unquote, meet their maker. Some call it the beloved, some call it the Christ, some call it the Lord, some call it God. Whatever the word, it doesn't matter, it's only words. I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody that says only my God, not this God. We're not here for that stuff. Whatever you want to call it is fine with me. Please, it doesn't matter. What matters is, even way back, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, they knew, even then, that there's going to be some sense of settlement, so to speak, internally. I'm not talking about guilt. I'm not talking about a fire and brimstone, going to hell, having the devil take you down through a dark hole, or angels are flying you up into the moon. We're not talking about that. that. Come on. That stuff is superstition. It's based on theological memory, theological identifications. It's just imagery to try to drive a certain point home. That's all it is, right? But the core of it is that when you get settled in your soul, when you are empty, when you are not greedy to stay, right? Staying is a form of greed. I'm not talking about the normal process of self-living. I'm not talking about self-preservation. I'm not talking about that. That's normal biological stuff. That's normal. But when there's a greediness to life, I want, I gotta have, I gotta take, I gotta accumulate. It's all mine, not theirs. Give me, give me, give me, give me. Give me my kids, my children, my husband, my friends. This, mine, mine, mine. When you get like that, and many people are like that, possessive as all hell, everything they have possessed is temporary. All of it, is including them. And as a result of that, eventually they're going to start suffering horribly because they feel by attaching all of this to them, somehow they feel more complete and more whole. But in truth of it, everything is going to be ripped off of them by time, illness, sickness, event. So the key is to be present with these things, to enjoy them as they rise and fall in your moving consciousness, not to try to possess them, own them, contain them, keep them, lock them on the box and key. And that's what many people do emotionally, right? The ego says, look at me, look what I've done, look at my history, look at my track record. I'm a Super Bowl champion, I'm a great dad, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a very, very bad guy, I'm the best killer in the prison. Whatever the identification is, there is one. And all of that, that whole suffering that's caused by that, if it's strong enough, it will continue with you into your next journey and will cause you a ton of grief. The masters knew it, and they said, live your life like loose clothing. Don't put your treasures, what's really important to you, where animals can eat them, rust can chop them up, where thieves can steal them. You're putting your treasures in the wrong place. And that wasn't just in the Christian teachings, it was worldwide and still remains. And they knew there had to be this surrender every day. That is why in many Buddhist traditions, you've seen Namaste, which also means I honor your soul. But often it's a surrendering that death may come at any time, and I'm willing to accept it completely. In the same way that love can come at any time, and I accept that completely. Because love and death are one and the same. Oh yes. The universe loves you so much that eventually it will bring you back into its flow. It will return you back. Your mind will not believe any of this, of course, but the universe will just look at you and say, that's just a product of your very limited thinking. But what is really true, is that the essence of you will continue to move through. And it moves through to what? It moves and continues to move through what we call the timeless, right? The eternal, and the endless, which is the infinite. The boundaries of eternity and infinity. This is why when I do readings for people, and people have come to see me, they will sit across from me, and they don't know who I am, right? They don't ever met me, I've never met them. And we start to share this really, really beautiful reading experience, and they're rocking their heads, and they're going, oh my God, and they're hitting the phone, and they're calling their husband, and they're saying, you got to hear what's going on here. All of the stuff is going on, not because of me, nothing to do with Robert. It's just that the consciousness, this stream is still flowing. And it's flowing with them. The only thing that's missing is the physical body. But the guest says, they're gone. And I'm telling them, they're not gone. They're right here. They go, I don't believe you. I said, you what? I'll give you their story. And you tell me if this story makes sense to you. Because they're going to share this story with me. And all of a sudden they're sitting there, and they're sitting there, and they're sitting there. And they're like this now, and they're recording again. And they're going, holy Christmas, this is my father exactly. I said, of course. He's still with you. He doesn't present himself as the man in the flannel shirt with the work shovel, but he comes with pure love for you. And in that pure love, he has retained his story. And that is why, my friends, most people call that process going to a purgatorial state, meaning you haven't shed everything. The true masters, the Christ figures, the true ones, the real, expanded spiritual people. And that's not just relegated for a rare few, you know. Many human beings have had this experience, especially at the time of physical death, which I was talking about before, when you're about ready to die. This is your chance. And you begin to see Really see deep down. Really let go. Let all your fears rise. Let all rise. And you will suddenly recognize that you and this one universe are the same. That you indeed are a child of God. Not just as an idea or some cutesy thing. I mean, really sense that you are one with the Father. You really have that feeling. Some people call it receiving Buddha light. Some people call it entering nirvana. Some people call it salvation, entering heaven. Whatever you want to call it, I don't care. The key to it is you have this magical opportunity. And the gift of death is to break that open for you. And I'm telling you, I've met enough of you guys to know that your children, especially the young ones, when their physical death ended, they are shuttled in it's almost like a pure white light. They are returned to complete peace and complete joy. It's unbelievable. And I'm telling you, I experience it. As an adult, most adults, we will not. Not like that. What we will do is we will have to shed more. But that's not a bad thing. People say, it's not a bad thing. It is natural. You are beginning to flake off your memories because the mind is beginning to break apart. You're beginning to recognize where you've come from, which is the eternal. You say to yourself, I'm finally home. My goodness, I've been home the whole time. I never knew it. My brain had me convinced I was something else. My brain, I was taught to be something else than what I really am. And when that mind starts to stop, when the brain starts to stop and consciousness begins to really look, there's no more interference from the thinking mind. The ego is dissolved. All of that is gone now. Consciousness now begins to break apart even more. And what's beautiful about it, when the consciousness memory really begins to break apart, a pure stream of light comes through. You enter the stream completely. And when you do that, you have entered what is commonly referred to the gates of heaven. And you are welcomed with a grace and a love that cannot be expressed on this recording or anyone else. When people talk about God's love, it's almost laughable, not to be disrespectful, of course, right? Not to be disrespectful. But no one can measure that level of love. It can't be measured. Right? It can't be measured. It's boundless. And that, my friends, is your destiny. You, your children, your moms, your dads, your brothers, your sisters, my kids, my wife, my dog, my pets, everything that is part of this life form process has no other place to go than to bliss, joy, and complete freedom. On the way there, depending upon the consciousness within, there will be delays, there will be interruptions, there will be moments of stillness, and then it will continue again. It is the ultimate movement of the universe to return you back to the one being what many call the beloved or God itself. But I don't want to get caught up in tags. So how does one prepare? How does one prepare? I mean, please, how does one prepare in the human form to take that journey? It's a journey no one's ever taken that they can talk about. You have people that talk about near-death experiences. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the ultimate ride. Right? Being so free of your mind, all thought, all memory, all experience, complete peace, complete joy, it can't be described. It can only be pointed to. It can only be pointed to. You can't even talk about it. Right? So how does one prepare for that which cannot be spoken? There's only one way. Silence. When you become the silent witness to each moment, when you allow the silence of the past to go quiet, when you remain still and just notice your thoughts as movement of the mind of the human being, not you. It is the story that you think you are talking to you. It's not you, not your true essence. This is just the movement of the mind. And that mind movement is going to suffer. It will in this world, in this lifetime, as a human being. We're all going to know this pain. We all. There's no one excluded from it. Not one single solitary person. With respect to the audience, I happen to be a Christian, so I'll go with the Jesus image on the cross. Right? The ultimate suffering, the ultimate pain, inescapable, terrible anguish, terrible sorrow, and yet on the other side of the cross, complete resurrection, complete ascension, complete freedom. So through the doorway of complete surrender is the window of complete freedom. That is the secret of death and dying. And that is why that man and others chose that direction, to teach the world, as it were. And that archetypal man, the man on the cross, that particular person represents humanity. The suffering, the struggling, the fear, the anxiety, the doubt, what's going on, where am I going to go, all of it. And it drove that soul to a place of complete surrender, acceptance, and resurrection. That process is within you and is within me. And that is how one prepares for death, to die on a daily basis. When physical death comes, you will be in that flow. And you cannot control the moment your soul releases. I don't care what the doctors say. I don't care what they say. Your soul has sensed it already, and it's beginning to move on. They may delay it physically for a while. When that soul wants out, it's getting out of there. It knows much better than the mind. Essence knows much better than the mind. And then finally, it is received back home. I'm home, I'm home, I'm home. Hey, Mom, hey, Dad, I'm back. Oh, my goodness. And that will absolutely occur. It occurs. So if you're worrying about meeting your husbands, your children, your daughters, your sisters, your cats, your dogs, your grandma, your grandpa, stop. There is nothing to worry about. I'm not just saying this because I'm a psychic guy talking to you. I've been reading for a long, long time. And my experiences have given me a very unique, perhaps gifted insight into what I'm telling you is absolutely 100% true. I would never use the soul of my own mother, my own father, my brother, my nephew to try to convince an audience of something. Believe me. If you know me at all, you would know I would never do that. All right? So I'm just letting you guys know we're finishing up this evening's talk. I want to thank you all for coming. Whoever was in attendance tonight, thank you so very much for being here. Please go to my website, robertehansen.com. If you are interested in upcoming events, we've got workshops, we've got classes, we've got special guests coming up. We'll be doing more and more of these throughout the winter season, throughout fall-winter season. And just to throw it out to you, I had a lot of requests from my son Bob, my young man who has autism. We had a great night here back in the late part of the spring. He's agreed to come back on over the fall season and update you a little bit about his life and take questions regarding autism and the autistic community that he's so proudly a part of. So a lot of good stuff is going on. Okay? So guys, I want to thank you all very much for coming in. I'm going to lean forward now. I'm going to hit this finish button on my own tonight. My office manager is a little busy, so I'm going to do it myself. I wish you all peace. And please, 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 please pray for those who no one prays for. The destitute, the dying, the unwanted, the abandoned. Thank you all very much. Good night.